Hello, Indianapolis. How are you today? So the old set carpenter in me has to build here, and the builder in me has to bring out some props in order to tell a story. So human life is story and ritual. And it's also about the politics of location. Storytellers mind us, bind us, and build us up. For thousands of years, we have been using story to educate, illustrate, and entertain. In fact, as far away as 40,000 years ago, when Cro-Magnon first painted that cave painting on the wall and created ritual by stacking objects to bring meaning to life, we were interacting with our environment to find meaning. My talk today is about cinderwork. And what is this, cinderwork? Part of my talk is about the politics of location and how post-industrial communities struggle to define themselves in the reinvention of their narratives. But my talk could just as easily be about working class people and how they're struggling to create identities in a postmodern and post-human world. My work as a teacher and an artist started with the idea of stacking objects and finding disparate narratives that are otherwise separated by time and space. My work is in many ways archaeology, and in many ways anthropology. I find objects that were made by other people, but by reconsidering them and dwelling upon them, they bring new meaning to my life. And as I look into my own community of Northwest Indiana, I see an opportunity to lay claim to it once again. I'm from an area called the Region, and for those of you who don't know of it, in his book, Region Rat, Rich Laskowski calls it, "You will know of the vast industrial wasteland that they speak of." They call this place the Region, and in turn, its occupants are called Region Rats, because they'll feed on almost anything to survive, and they are hard to kill. Hard to kill. I kind of like that. My modes of inquiry span a number of different things. I work in brand development and creative direction, creating symbols with partners and trying to build tribes around products. I've worked in the theater and supported playwrights with their visions of storytelling. Recently, my work has turned toward ethnography and collecting histories of working class people, and autoethnography, making sense of my own lived experience as a working person. I haven't always found this philosophical and artistic pursuit to be a lucrative vocation. My parents are over here, they'll attest to that. But what I've found is a common narrative of dislocation in this class of people, a common narrative of cultural bereavement. And as I hear this grief, I think of the cinders. And it sounds uncommon from a common land, with fine-tuned minds, hearts, and calloused hands. Not black or white, but skin of tarnished tin, of rusted blue, blue like the collar that I wear, like my father over there, like me and you, like the shirt he wore in the 80-inch in that hot strip in the Valley of the Sun. He was a champion, you see. He had won. He sent me to school to come up with ideas and find objects that I could stack for you. In the spirit of keeping it simple, I thought I would try to take my academic work and distill it down into a pedagogy that we could package and be able to implement in schools for children at the kindergarten level. And so I wanted to talk a little bit and unpack a little story structure so that we all had a language that we could understand. Behind me is Joseph Campbell's hero journey. It's fairly used a lot in TED Talks, and I've combined it with Aristotle's three-act structure. And my premise is this, is that all of our stories, or all of our problems rather, are story problems. And as I learned studying at the Atlantic Theater Company in New York with David Mamet, he says that early playwrights have an issue with second acts. They don't understand how to get their hero through this second act crisis, this katabasis, as the Greeks would call it. This is the place I call the cinderwork. For you tech people, it's beta, right? Always be in beta. The testing, the experimentation, the innovation phase. Artists know about this because they live in this place. Oftentimes, policymakers and politicians don't have the opportunity to take the time to explore their creative capacities. I note Gary, Indiana, as a case study of urban decay. Over the last 120 years, it's gone from an industrial utopia of productivity and experimentation, innovation, to the city of the century in 1950, to the decay and the tragedy of human separation and stagnation. Today, Gary is a museum of urban decay. Photographers will travel there from all over the world to photograph what happens when people move on from a place and leave behind works of beauty. Cinderwork has just one rule, and that rule is we always have the resources to make magic. The legerdemain of labor is all we need. There are resources, abundant resources in communities like Braddock, Pennsylvania, like Gary, Indiana, Reading, PA, and Flint, Michigan, but it takes an exploration of our own creative capacities. I know this because I was fortunate enough to take a job teaching at a small school in Gary, and they didn't give me an art class to teach. They gave me a gym class to teach. And so in those classes, I began to find ways to bring my theater training back into the language. And I brought Stanislavski's animal work into the classroom. I distilled this process down into the hashtag SPARK, that we must tell stories, we must make them performative and participate in our community as citizens. And this gives us agency as individuals, agency to change our communities. That the world reflects us when we own our story. But bear in mind, this doesn't come without pushback. The katabasis of the second act. That through this creative process, we're going to meet with challenges. But as heroes of our own destiny, we have to be willing to experiment and fail in order to improve ourselves and the communities around us. This is my recent project, and it is a collaboration between my mother and I, and a great friend of mine who's an illustrator, and it came out of my work in the children's school, the charter school of the Dunes, and I call it Gary is a Fish. And it's the idea of repurposing the name of the town, but to offer a new narrative, filled with characters that teach yoga and wellness through nutrition. We have characters that are able to count numbers and things. Mr. Whip, the squirrel. Gary the Fish is entrepreneurial, and he brings his community of Harmony Pond together with all of his friends. We've moved on to creating a literacy program for the children to see themselves in the children's literature, the moral imperative of marginal voices that is missing in publishing today. So here's a way that we've sparked the community. We've created a project that brings pedagogy into the classroom. and complements the Common Core in a way that isn't being done in a lot of these schools. I think this program works so well that we've designed a larger community initiative called Rusted Blue Media Works. It is a prescription for participatory media making. So oftentimes, the stories that you hear of these places come from outside sources. Stories about Gary and the region are often being produced by Chicago's media. You don't get to meet the people inside of that community that are doing the hard cinder work on the ground. This is what this community initiative is looking to change. We're going to change it through entrepreneurship, yes, but by collecting oral histories and finding the narratives of the real people living in the margins. We're offering ideas of media literacy and teaching people how to use modern tools and use them wisely. And we want to broadcast the stories from within to show the world what is really going on inside of that community as a piece of community alchemy. The handyman. As I end today, I want to give you a vision of the world that I see in my community. It's a story of a town on the southern rim of the lake, yes. It's a place that some call the Great Mistake, but see, others call that town the G. I'm not trying to hear that. I call it one region, you see? And the lake, it's stretched out like an ancient whale in time. And the souls that built that place before, they inhabit that murky deep, and they began to weep when we built that wall, and the children cried, and the earth fell silent. But here tonight in this place, we can spark it. We can change things. We can build a bridge, shake a hand, raise a glass, and make a stand. The emerald city that we all seek was always in one another's hearts to keep. So promise me this tonight, or today, here in this place. If I continue this process of doing this Rusted Blue, take Spark out into your world. #Spark, tell us your story about how you're changing your community with your own narratives and your own performances. I thank you for your time today. My hope and wish for you always, keep it true and Rusted Blue.